Anyway, let's watch Ava Santina talk about asylum seekers on Jeremy Vine. Should be interesting.
Home Office figures show that the backlog of asylum cases has hit a record high of over 175,000. That's up by 44%. So we're asking a simple question. Who's to blame? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need to get your calls in now. Ava, one of the pledges of the Prime Minister's was not only to stop the boats, but to also get the so-called legacy backlog down that relates to claims that have been made before a certain time. But the backlog is growing and growing. Is this a failure of the Home Office?
Yes. I mean, in a simple, I could leave it there. Yes. Well, also, you know, last week, Rishi Sunak actually rode back on his Stop the Boats pledge, didn't he? He said that he wasn't actually quite sure he could meet the targets that he'd originally pledged. But look, I mean, with the Home Office, to me, it just sort of reads like managed decline or maybe even like weaponized incompetence. I don't understand how
It absolutely is weaponized incompetence. It is absolutely weaponized incompetence. They wanted there to be a political wedge issue, so they deliberately created one. Let's close off the safe routes. Let's make sure the asylum system is being as hamstrung as possible. And then suddenly we have a divisive issue to turn people against each other. It's very simple.
every other country in the world is able to process people who are seeking asylum, apart from us. It feels like a deliberate attempt to essentially create a group of people that the country can now throw stones at and leverage hate at, and then somehow that will, elect them at the next election. None of it makes sense to me.
Nick, what do you make of it? The list has grown and grown and grown.
All the figures have grown. I certainly don't think that the government are intentionally doing this to try and stir hate against migrants. I don't think.
I mean, you'd be wrong to not think that, because they are doing that. It's obvious to anyone who has a functioning cortex.
That's their intention. I do agree that they're completely incompetent. I mean, the system, the people who've been in the system for more than 6 months has grown by about 50%. And there are a lot of people who are to blame, in my view. I mean, the target must be the criminal gangs, mustn't it? The sophisticated criminal gangs. And,
The criminal gangs only exist because they have been given a market by the Conservative government. By closing off the legal routes, or the safe routes even, because any route to get there, as long as you claim asylum, is technically a legal route. Closing off the safe routes, the regular migratory routes for these people to be able to come and claim asylum here, is what's caused the gangs to have a captive market, right? If there was an easy way for these people to come here, they would not have to rely on the gangs. But by taking away those routes, that's created the demand in the first place. Sure, are the criminal gangs bad people? Yes, that's obviously true. But if you want to stop the gangs, you have to break the demand somewhere.
They're not. They're under the radar. And why are they under the radar? Why isn't the international agencies, the police forces, dealing with them, taking them out, sorting them out? If you do that, you solve a problem massively. You've still got a huge problem here. The government are incompetent. They can't make their mind up which way to go with it.
Do you think that they're deliberately not?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, here's something. Look, 10 years ago...
But I think they're very incompetent.
Okay, well, 10 years ago, though, just 10,000 was the backlog. Just 10,000. And actually, a lot of people are saying, well, actually, the backlog is increasing because more people are coming. That's not quite true, because the backlog was already growing in 2018, and that year, only 299 people came across on small boats.
Oh, it's interesting as well, like you look at the Labour years under Blair, when we were processing twice as many asylum seekers as we're getting now. When it was properly funded and functioning properly with proper routes available, we processed a lot of asylum seekers.
So I guess what I'm asking, and I hope this doesn't sound like two sort of tinfoil hats here, but does it suit the government to have a large backlog? We heard Robert Jenrick, a government minister, about 2 weeks ago saying, well, a large backlog will dissuade people from wanting to come over. If they think I'm going to come over and be stuck in a queue of 175,000 people, I'm not going to bother going.
Completely the opposite.
So yeah, all of that money they are spending is specifically money that's being spent to fix a crisis that they created, and that they are happy to spend the money to try and think that it will solve the crisis. It's the dumbest political position they ever have. In fact, a journalist I really hate, Ian Dunn, actually wrote an article about this, and I think he's right here to say this. They are spending reams of taxpayers' money to deal with a crisis that they created as essentially to try and get re-elected. It's the ultimate form of pork barreling, to just take taxpayers' money and use it to try and get re-elected rather than to govern correctly. they're happy to take huge amounts of public money and incinerate it for political gain. And at no point during any of this, at no point whatsoever has any journalist gone to Suella Braverman, gone to Rishi Sunak and said, where are you going to find the money? No point. You know, as long as we're being cruel to people that we have depersonalized in the public consciousness, as long as we're being cruel to people deliberately, doesn't matter. The money is completely immaterial. We can find the money from anywhere. As soon as you want to feed children, you want to have a better welfare state, you want to nationalize an industry, suddenly it's all looking through the checkbook. Public finance is not good enough for the good things. Where are the people asking where the money's coming from? Nowhere. They're nowhere to be seen.
Because Sunak's hung his reputation, hasn't he? One of his pledges is, I'm going to reduce this backlog, and he will be judged by the claim that he was going to make. So if he doesn't achieve his objectives, he can't expect the electorate to support him. So I think completely the contrary. One of the problems, of course, is that the law assists the migrants. And I think it's about 7 years from start to finish to the end of the appeal process. So if you get...
The implication is it'll save money. Well, ironically, you know, we tried the whole saving money thing during the austerity period, and it gave us the underfunding of the asylum system that's led to the massive backlog that we currently have. Austerity always fails.
Onto our land, you know you're going to be here for 7 years at the moment, which is just a crazy amount of time, and you're going to be supported during that time. So
watch running into the next election, suddenly the small boats issue will be solved. It will be. And you know what will solve it? Opening up the routes again and not telling anybody. That's what they're going to do. Mark my words. They're going to quietly reopen the routes 6 months or so, or 4 months or so before the next election, and then people will be taking legitimate regular means across to get to the UK to claim asylum. There might be a large asylum backlog, but the boats will have been stopped, and Rishi Sunak can tick another pledge off his list, along with the inflation that was going to come down, and regardless, and likewise with the NHS waiting lists. And tabloids will sing the praises. Yeah, very, very true. By doing the thing that we were saying they should have done all along.
That's a very attractive proposition.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on that. I think actually going into the next election, I think he'd like to, you know, Sunak would like to say, we are the party that is going to solve immigration. If this goes to Labour and Starmer, they're going to let anyone in and there's going to be open borders. So I think, yeah, he is doing it deliberately.
All right, let's find out. You guys disagree whether it's deliberate or not. Linda in Swansea has called in. Good afternoon, Linda. What do you reckon? Who's to blame for this huge increase?
Right, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm disgusted with the situation in this country, actually, to be honest. You know, you had a gentleman the other day that, on your panel that said we should be in a right where we can actually send them back.
Right.
Right. But it's not happening. We've got, as I've said before on this show, I would have liked to have seen Nigel Farage see this through. Right. That's always be what I think. Okay. But we're in such a mess. I went out yesterday and...
What would Farage have done? In fact, Farage is to blame for a lot of this because a load of the return agreements that we had in place when we were a member of the European Union, we now no longer have. Brexit helped exacerbate this crisis.
And our town is inundated. And then we've got people up in Llanelli that are outside with banners and everything else trying to stop these asylum seekers being put into a beautiful hotel they got down there.
Okay.
It's just literally getting out of hand. And
But then, Linda, let me ask you this.
And again, worth pointing out, another thing that they are also doing deliberately is ensuring that when they are trying to find a place to house the asylum seekers as part of the backlog, always working class communities. It's always Portland, it's always Llanelli, it's always working class areas, and that's deliberate. They're not putting them in Stoke Poges, right? They're not going to Saffron Walden. They're not going to Hastings. Of course they're not. They're not being put in any of these places where people who actually be Conservative voters are. They're being put in working class places because they want to try and create a divide. They want to drive a wedge. They want to ensure that the people who are having the blow dealt upon them of having to deal with an influx of people straining their local public services are people who they can use to find a reason to dislike the asylum seekers rather than the government, but because they don't recognise that it's being done deliberately. And again, obviously I disagree with this person's views quite clearly from what I've said so far in this segment, but for her to say, well, there is issues going down in Llanelli at the moment because of the amount of asylum seekers that are being put up in hotels in the area, and I'm like, this is deliberate government policy. Why would they want to put the asylum seekers where their mates live, where their rich mates live in Westminster? You know, of course not. They're going to go into working class communities.
In that case, don't you want the Home Office to process more people? That means that there are going to be fewer people in hotels. I can tell you that almost half the people in hotels come from very few countries: Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iraq, and Iran. Now, we know that most of the asylum seekers from those 4 countries, they've got a 98 to 99% of getting their applications accepted. So you're going to let those people in at some point. If you
Also worth pointing out, when you talk about these things, you really have to put it in context too. Because he'll say 98% have their claims accepted. I think it's pretty high. It's a large amount. I'm not sure if it's that high, but it's definitely a high amount coming from these places. And then if you don't qualify that with a why, the obvious response will be, well, let's not accept so many claims and just send them back and not process any at all. When really what you've got to say is, and that these people are our responsibility, because half these countries we have bombed in the last 2 decades.
Process their applications faster, then perhaps those people can move out of the hotels, reduce the bills, and also go to work, start earning money, pay taxes, contribute to our community. Wouldn't you be for that?
Right. What I think is we've got to, at the moment, I don't think we can take any more people here. Well, this is my answer to it all. I mean,
it's engineered so that we can't, right? I don't necessarily disagree with people for the reasons why people say this stuff. They look at their public services on the brink of collapse, social housing waiting lists being stratospheric, right? And they go, there's just no wiggle room for more people in this country. I get why they say those things. But the response to this is not, let's just stop fulfilling our global duty towards asylum seekers. The answer is, of course, build more houses, build more hospitals, increase funding for public services. Ironically, if we get more people into this country being productive as workers, right, rather than sitting around in hotels and asylum seeker waiting lists, we would increase our productive capacity so that we can have more money for public services, so we can have more money for more housing, right? We need to have politicians who want to build more social housing, which currently none of the major parties want to do. Like, I get why these people are frustrated with their infrastructure being entirely squeezed through population increase. But the infrastructure wouldn't be squeezed if it was being invested in properly, which of course it isn't, because why would neoliberals invest in infrastructure?
I know they keep going on about people working. I always think, what's wrong with getting our own people up and working?
Okay.
I get rid.
Unemployment is like 4%. It's lower than it's been, apart from when it was 3% like a month ago, right? This current period of low unemployment, it's the lowest it's been since the 70s, right? People in this country are working, right? There's very few people are on a job seekers allowance. People who are on universal credit, 40% of these people are already in work already. No, we already have a tight labour market. There is wiggle room for more people to come here and work. We just need investment in the infrastructure to be able to support the people coming in.
Really angry over it. This is our country. This is our country.
Okay, Linda.
Okay, I've stopped empathising now.
Nick,
I think at the moment, one of the largest countries people coming in are from Albania, which is regarded as a safe country. I think.
No, they're not coming from Albania anymore. That's a lie. That's not true. Since we had the returns agreement, the Albanians have stopped coming. In the last quarter, ever since we had the returns agreement with Albania, the biggest 4 countries, the main ones, have been Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And apart from Iran, all of these are countries that we've bombed in the last 20 years.
But we've got our deal with Albania now, and most of the people are going back. And I mean, and let's also make.
Are they going back?
But they're being sent back because I'm
gonna have to debunk this like in real time because I'm so sick. People just making shit up on the spot. See, look here, right? If you look here, this is the stats for countries. Albania is this little blue speck here. Q3 2022 was when it became a big thing mid-year last year, where you could not turn on the news without talking about Albanians being part of the migration figures, right? And then we got our returns agreement early 2023. As soon as the returns agreement started, they've just stopped, dropped off the face of a cliff because of the returns agreement. So this guy's just lying, or just doesn't understand what he's saying.
We've got to deal with Albania. You wanted to speak to Linda as well.
Well, Linda, I just wanted to know what you meant by the term inundated. What do you mean that Swansea is inundated
we've got
with
so many
who?
people here. Have you ever walked around? I mean, I don't know where you live, but I went out yesterday and I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I felt like a stranger in my own country. I'm not being rude.
So it is racism. So it is just I'm seeing too many brown people. It's not there are too many people and there's a strain on public services. An argument that I could definitely least see the point in. I can understand why people would feel that way. Their ire is placed in the wrong position, right? Saying there's too much strain on public services. Can we have the refugees and asylum seekers elsewhere, right? The argument is false because, you know, the real problem is not indeed the increase in population, because that does need to increase to have a replacement level number of people to continue growing the economy. But the problem is the lack of investment in the infrastructure that they are then straining, right? That's the big problem. She doesn't care about any of that. She just doesn't want to see brown faces, right? Too many brown people. That's it. That's all she cares about. Okay, well, thank you, Linda, for being very racist.
Good when I say that. I'm not a racist.
When your whole point of this is nothing economic, it's nothing like that, it's just I'm seeing too many brown people, then, like, I'm sorry, what other word can I describe you other than racist?
It's getting tired of it, actually.
Well, I'm not quite sure how else that can come across, Linda.
This is our country. Sorry?
She's an English person in Wales, right? I'm sorry, go back to your own country then. Wales is full, right? Get back to normal land.
Or how that can, like, come across any other way, to be honest. I don't really know what you mean by our country. What exactly do you mean?
Well, the country is overpopulated. We have a country that's overpopulated. There's a limited number of resources, and it's being stretched and stretched and stretched. And
what do you think resources are? Where do you think resources come from? As far as space goes, you can still build upwards. If you want to stop all population increase, by all means, have a perpetual recession if you want. I don't want a perpetual recession at all, right? But if you want the population to shrink to make the country smaller, then you're going to have to deal with a recessionary economy. And even then, the country just isn't full. It's just not true. We have more empty homes than we have homeless people.
And we have to, you know, we've got a health service, and people who have contributed all their lives are not being prioritised because there are demands in the same way that there is in education by people who haven't contributed to the system.
Okay, but let's look at the
Immigrants are a net benefit because they've not spent 18 years as children being a gigantic drain on the state, right? In fact, immigrants are a much better way of growing your population because you've not had to spend 18 years of state investment to be able to get them to the point where they start joining the workforce and becoming productive. Like, if you truly want to care about people paying into the system, then by all means, legalise child labour if you want.
The immigration figures from 2022, most of those people have come from Hong Kong and they've come from Ukraine. There has never been an argument or a debate about whether those people should have come from Ukraine or not. But for some reason, the 40,000 people who have come here from war-torn countries like Afghanistan, that is up for debate, and I don't quite understand that.
No, I agree with you. From war-torn countries, that's absolutely right. But about 44% have come on the small boats. And that we cannot be encouraging that. We need to dissuade people.
As Zoe Gardner rightly pointed out, the influx of small boats immediately happened after the irregular routes were closed. That's it. Ground zero for the small boats crisis.
Apart from the safety aspects, that's not the right way to come onto our shores.
I just don't think
and that's nearly half the number of people coming into this country.
I just sort of think this kind of the rhetoric around deterrent and the action of deterrent is not working. We need to start looking at push factors. We need to start thinking, well, what can we do to war-torn countries to assist in those places? What can we do about climate change that is pushing people to leave their countries? You know, rather than focusing on let's sort of put a moat up and a big wall, why are people trying to come here in the first place would be a better place to start.
Because it's such an attractive country to come. We give massive...
You said it, Ava, you said it. Did the government accept asylum applications from abroad, or do the immigrants have to get here? The only asylum applications that we accept from abroad are from Hong Kong and Ukraine. But unless you've got that route available, you have to get to this country to be able to declare asylum. And of course, the reason why there are routes for Hong Kong and Ukraine and there aren't for the other countries is because we don't want the brown people. It's as simple as that. That's the only reason.
Absolutely. Well, as I say, once you come here, you stay here for 7 years and everything is provided. That's quite an attractive proposition.
That's actually categorically not true. You're given a stipend of about £35 a week and no one is crossing the channel for that tiny little nominal amount of money.
And accommodation and 3 meals a day.
But they
and
don't want to be in the hotel. They want to be working. And I know that because I spend a lot of time working with these people who have crossed the channel.
And the ones who are successful can work.
But they're not allowed to. That's the problem.
Well,
and that's because of the Home Office.
Right. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next call. Robert in Belfast. Robert, good afternoon.
Good morning, Alexis. I'd like to say very clearly here, you're talking about the high asylum backlog.
Yeah.
Who's to blame? The government's to blame. They should have put back in boats and brought back again. Now, truthfully and honestly, somebody saying that seems very ruthless. I'm a taxi driver, right? I can tell you in Belfast, most of the hotels in Belfast are not open to the public. The asylum
Okay, but
seekers
Robert, you can't do that. You can't put people back on boats and put them back. You're just not allowed to do that.
Excuse me, Alex. What about the problems with the homeless on our streets? They're local people.
But no one is saying...
Okay, find me any time in the past decade before this crisis happened that you ever cared about homeless, Robert. When was the last time you ever cared about the homeless other than as a rhetorical stick that you can use to beat the brown people with?
But Robert, I don't think anyone's saying is either or. They're not saying that you either look after asylum seekers or you look after homeless or people who need government help. The idea is that you should be able to help both.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I don't know, have you studied?
I must say, I'm very impressed with Alexis Conran actually understanding a lot of the facts, which is ironic, incredible, like how pathetic the UK legacy media is, that I'm just impressed by somebody knowing facts. He's been pretty good at countering a lot of the points that's been made to him.
The people in all these hotels isn't open to the public, which the hotels, first point, get £4,500 a month from the Home Office, which is the taxpayers' money. Look at most of the asylum seekers. They're all healthy males in their 20s and 30s.
Okay. Yeah, they are the ones who can make the journey easily across continents to be able to make the asylum claim, so then their family can come over later. Unless you thought you wanted their children to be even more likely to die trying to get across the Mediterranean.
There's something rather. They're milking the whole, truthfully and honestly, they're milking the whole system.
Okay, Robert, I've got to leave it there only because of time, but you got your views across. Again, we're talking about the backlog, and I think it's something that we're going to carry on talking because it's getting bigger and bigger.
It's getting bigger, but don't we need to make it clear to these countries where they come from that actually it's not a sort of utopian existence here? And I think they come here because they're sold a pup.
No, they come here because they speak English, right? Or they speak more English than they do French or Slovenian, like...
That's very briefly, because I've got to go. We've got seconds.
I mean, if you want to blame anyone for, if you do subscribe to the "we should send them back" idea, then blame Nigel Farage. Okay. Because after Brexit, we were not allowed to send people back.
True. Wow, those callers were awful. Jesus Christ, state of this country. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.